I'm going to use this bottle that I built on a different tutorial to demonstrate some materials and rendering in three different ways. I'm going to do an opaque bottle, like a polyethylene bottle. I'm going to do a clear PET bottle and a glass bottle. I'm going to use this exact same geometry for all three of them. So this will be more about rendering techniques and lighting and material. So this structure needed a few changes from when I built it before. The only thing I really did was put a radius on the shoulder of the bottle right here, because we're going to see that when we do the renderings. Another part, it's not as important, but most bottles have what they call a push-up or a punt in the bottom, and that prevents the bottle from wobbling. So you push up the bottom, it gives us a little bit of strength and integrity, depending on how much material and weight is inside, and allows it to sit on an edge instead of having it completely. So this push up here allows this edge to sit down. So sometimes in glass bottles, they might have like a little bump texture and things like that. And that's also to prevent the bottle from hydroplaning. So if you put it down on a watery surface, the bottle can actually start to move around. I think we probably all have seen that with drinking glasses, perhaps. So we really don't want that in a production bottle. So that's the only change. So all I did here is I just took a curve, revolved it, and then capped it off top and bottom, made a solid out of it, and just differenced it from the object. So the object is a solid at this point. So for doing an opaque bottle, we don't really need to do anything with the geometry. We can leave that the same. So what I am going to do is put a label. Well, actually, it's not a label. This will be a direct print. So this curve is a revolve that I've trimmed and then repeated it around 4 times, and that's from the other tutorial when I built that. So this is a compound curve. It's curving in both axes. It goes around and then curves on this axis. So we really can't put a label or a PSL on that. It has to be a direct print, which is like a pad print or just putting the ink right on that to create a graphic. So I'm just using a graphic as a demonstration purpose to see how this is going to work. This negative cavity I have here in all 4 locations would prevent this from being able to put a shrink label on it. This is too deep a crevasse in here to get that to suck in there. So this would not be good for shrink label. Maybe shrink banding, but the design hasn't been organized to do that. So that's just some of the labeling considerations. So I'm just going to demonstrate direct print on this. So I created a piece of art as a PNG. And obviously the art is flat, but I created this curved surface. All I did was take a curved line that lines up with the bottle, and I just extruded it and created this curved surface that aligns with the curve. So what we're doing is, if I tried to decal that on a clear bottle, it wouldn't show up. We can decal on an opaque bottle. So this particular bottle is opaque. So let's just go in here and just put in a regular render mode. So I have picked this color on here and I have mapped in this graphic on there. The graphic was set up as a PNG in Photoshop and I brought it in as a texture and not as a decal. So what that allows us to do is to take this piece of art, which I have right here, and I just literally dragged it over and dropped it onto this surface. And what it does is it makes the background of this surface clear, so you can see to what's behind it. So this bottle I'm going to render first is opaque. I could take a decal that's a PNG and drop this right onto the bottle. That would work. But I wanted to set this up so I could use this on clear bottles, which we'll see in the other 2 renderings that I'm going to demonstrate. So that's just the difference between decaling and using a texture map for the graphics. So I have selected a color here. And let's go into, so to take a look at colors, if you go into your rendering tools and you go under your materials here, I have all these colors set up. So when I select this bottle with the color on it, you'll see that it has this yellow dot on here. So I know that's the color that I'm working with. So I'm just going to click on that. I'm going to keep this pretty simple this will sort of simulate an opaque polyethylene kind of a blow molded bottle. So I just have it on paint, and the option with paint is obviously the color. and then how shiny it is. So I brought it down from really, really shiny. I'm going to reserve the shininess to the PET. But you could make this very, very shiny and it still could be an opaque bottle. So it's a lot of moving parts here. I'm going to try to distinguish between the two of them. So by bringing this a little less shiny, it will be, it'll just reflect some lighting here. So right now I have not very much of an environment. I have selected the cap here. Let's just go in to take a look at what I did there. I go into my materials and I have that as a metal. So when you right click in space here in an empty area, you're allowed to import from the material library. So over here we have a whole series of different types of materials. So I think we just went into metal, and I think I just did a regular polished metal. I clicked on that, and I brought that in. So that's what I have here. And we can, with metal, you can you can affect the how shiny it is. Now, the shininess here in metal is much different than the shiny part in paint or in plastic. Here, you can almost go to like a complete mirror, and you can select your color. You just double click in here, you can go to your color picker. So I added just a little bit of gray. I'd like to add a little bit of richness to it so it's not completely white like a mirror. And I backed off on the polish quite a bit. So I have a little bit of a satin feel to it. So that's what this metal surface looks like without doing anything else. And it's sitting up here. So I have a nice little highlight on this radius at the top. But it is a bit dead. This whole sidewall, since it's angled down, I'm not getting any reflections in there. So that's what this whole tutorial is going to be about. When you get involved with reflective materials, it's all about the environment that is reflecting into there. So what Rhino has done is if you go under your rendering tools here, they give you the ability to bring in environments. Now these environments, there's a whole series of different environments. So if we go to over here to the side and you click on that and then go to the plus sign, we can import environments. They have a whole series of different environments. These environments have objects, lights and furniture and maybe foliage and a whole bunch of different things. And you can bring them in and it'll create a 360-degree environment that you put your object into. Now, some of these environments you can see and some will just be for reflections. So up here at the top, the 360 environment, depending on what you select here, I'm going to show this a little bit when I do the glass, you will see that environment behind your object. If you come down here to the next one and you click on Use Custom Environment for Reflections, you can pick one of those environments and it will reflect into your object, but you won't see it behind the object. So it allows you to have that control. And you can also use it for lighting. I'm not going to spend as much time on that because I'm going to set up some of my own lights to see how that's going to work. So there's a lot to do in here, and it takes a little bit of experimenting and fooling around with these different things to figure out what we're going to do. So I'm going to streamline this and just use a few of these options. So as far as material, I've got the plastic with a little reflector on it, and I have the metal part at the top, and it is sort of dying. I have the floor on right here. I have on ground planes to use reflective environments for reflections. I have ground plane on. So that is just stating that it's sitting on something. So if I turn that off, we just lose that little bit of shadow at the bottom there. Otherwise, this is pretty straightforward. So if I rotate this up, you see this gradation and we see these lights up at the top. That's the reflective environment that we have here for this would be for the Rhino Studio. So it's pretty straightforward. Um, without doing anything too interesting to it. So it is sort of kind of flat. It's not a lot going on. So I'm just going to demonstrate kind of building my own environment. I experimented a lot with these stock environments and it really didn't quite do what I wanted to do. So I'm going to demonstrate or talk about building an environment. So I'm going to go to my layers and I have just this bottle selected and I have environment down here. So I'm just going to select that and bring that in. Now, I got a couple of these hotspots here, but that's because I'm just in render mode. I'm also going to demonstrate setting up perspective. So you can move this around and you can set up your point of view. I like doing that first. So I picked a point of view that I like. It kind of shows the detail on the bottle, a little bit of the sides, a little bit of a three-quarter view. So I think the best way to do this is if we go under our set views. Now I'm going down on the drop-down menu within this portal. All of this, I'm not using the one up here. I'm using the one within this portal. So it's controlling just within the perspective portal. So I'm going to select this and come down to set view. And down here, we can go to named views. I have this one named view. You can list a whole series of different views depending on what you want to do. I already have one saved, so we don't need to go into that anymore. So I'm going to come down here and go to set views, and I have perspective one set up. So if I click on that, it automatically brings it into this point of view that I like. So I think that's a good idea because we're going to be moving this around and looking, and you don't want to keep guessing on where your point of view is. So if you save that, you can always go back to what this is, especially when we start moving lighting around. We're going to set up the lighting in the environment to perfectly align with this point of view. So we want to remember that. Another thing that I like to do here is to check instead of going up to our rendering tool all the time, within this drop-down menu, we have a piece here called ray traced. So if you select ray trace, that's going to imitate what's happening in render mode. I have it down here. There's cycles. I think when I first opened, it's like 100 cycles. And when we do our final rendering, we're going to have like 500 cycles, which is going to make a nice rendering. But that takes a few minutes. You don't want to wait for that every time you do this. So I set this to roughly 10 of 10 cycles. You can do 20, depending on how fast your computer is. You can start to set that up. So now we are starting to get some interest here. Now you can see some of this darkness back here and this illuminated highlight on the closure. And that's also coming down into the bottle. That is coming from my environment. And I'll show you what I did for the environment because I have my environment on. I'm going to turn the environment off. And in real time, it will change. So watch the image. And the cycles are going to come across now with ray traced. So now it's in ray trace. So it's nice. We're getting some of the highlights, but you see how I'm losing that highlight and that nice dark area here on the bottle? It's okay, but I don't think it's very interesting. So I'll show you what I did in the environment. So I'm going to click back to the environment to put that on. Now, if you watch our object, you can see how that's going to bring up the highlight and this dark area. And I also have another light in the back here to get this back illumination. So this semi-chrome shining thing is slightly satin, looks quite beautiful in this point of view. And we have a little bit more interest in the bottle. So I'm going to turn the ray trace off so we don't have to keep waiting for that. So I'm going to go back into rendered mode, and I'm just going to back up. And I know I have some other objects here, but the thing we want to look at, I'm going to go into shaded so we can see everything. So this shaded panel I have right here, that's just a big panel that I made. I put it off to the side and I made it black. It's a black color, and that's what's actually reflecting into our bottle. These other rectangles here are lights. So if we're in render mode, which I am right now, we have different lighting fixtures we can create. So I just picked the rectangular lighting fixture and literally just drew a rectangle. And when you draw that rectangle, you get this little arrow in the middle. That means this is a evenly illuminated panel that you can move around in your environment. It's really relatively straightforward to work with. I kept it vertical, straight up, but if we look at it from the top view, I positioned it around my object. Let's go into my views, top. So I positioned it like this so I can get a highlight on the front because my viewpoint is coming over here slightly to the right-hand side. That's my perspective. So I want to have a highlight illuminating over here. And I put another one back here, which is creating what they call backlighting. So it's going to illuminate the back edge. And then I have that black panel. It's not illuminating. That's just a panel in space that will reflect into my object. So this is basic photo studio setups. This is like when you guys go over to the library and you're using the photo studio and a seamless background and you have lighting. It's really great that you are experiencing that because that has a lot to do with 3D rendering and a 3D program. It's very much like a photo studio. So by being able to set this up, I basically have two, I have the overall global illumination that I use from that studio. And then I have this object in space that's reflecting in it. And then I have these two additional lights that I can control. So that's how I am creating that little nuance on those reflections. So I'm just going to go back to my set view and come down here to perspective. So now I'm back to where I started from. So that's basically the setup for this opaque bottle. There's one more thing that we can do. I'm going to go back into ray traced and I have my object on. And I have that nice little dark area here, and I have this illumination. I have these lights kind of like 30%. I could make that quite a bit brighter. But I think for a kind of semi-glossy matte polyethylene type bottle, this isn't bad. But of course, you can play with these different settings. Another thing, I did have the floor on, um, the bottom area. Another thing you can do is bring in your own surface. So I did that just to create some illumination here and get like a reflective surface. So now we can see this little area. So it really depends on your setup. So this isn't bad. It looks like it's sitting on something and I'm getting a little reflectivity down here. So what I did with this, I think I just made this a glass surface. Now the reason I made it glass is because I am actually building these geometries in space. So this glass is clear. It is allowing those objects and the lights to shine through the glass surface because I have them going down really low so I can get some of those dark areas down here in the bottom. If I made that opaque, the reflections of down here would not be exposed here in the bottom. So that would be a bit of a challenge, and I'll show you that real quick. So I'm going to go into my render tools and materials, and I believe I have this. Where do I have this? Okay, right here, where I have this yellow dot. So I have that, and click on this, and I have that in 100% clarity. So that's clear. So the only reason it's coming out gray is because it's being affected by the lighting. So if I were to take that, and I guess let's just back this off. Say I don't make it clear at all. And now we're going to watch it update. It might not work if I have it under glass. Okay, so we can start to see it a little bit. It's starting to take away from these reflections and highlights. It's very subtle. I think if I made it opaque, this would go away entirely, like if I made it plastic or something like that. So it's pretty subtle here, but this will become much more apparent when I do clear bottles. We're going to be able to see that. So I'm just going to put this back to 100% clarity, and it'll update now and allow that highlight and reflection to come all the way through and not be diminished by sitting on an opaque surface. So now it's much more pronounced. So this is actually set up nicely. Point of view, we have materials, and then I have my ray tracing, which I tested. So to go to a final rendering, then you go up to your render tool up here at the top. Let's say I like this, I like the point of view, and I like how this is working. And if you go up to render, this is where you will do a final rendering. So we have, I think I just have the parameters of the viewport is what I'm going to be working with. And where is it? Okay, here it is. Okay, so down here we can see I have the cycles set up on this thing at 500. So we're not going to wait for that, but this is how you'll do your more final rendering. It really depends on what kind of resolution and what you're going to use it for. So this will take, you know, 30 minutes, 20 minutes. It'll take some time to do that, but you'll have a nice resolution. So once that reaches 0, then you can save it. So you go under File, and then you go to Save As, and you save it as a JPEG where you want to have that. So quite often I'll make it with a pretty big background, and then I'll crop it later because I might have different needs for this depending on what I'm going to do with that. So I'm not going to let that render, but that's set up very simple. Stop rendering. Yes, it should go away. Yes. Okay. So now I'm back to where I started from. Okay. So that's doing an opaque bottle. So I'm going to take this exact same geometry and I'm going to do a plastic PET bottle. So let's turn this back into rendered and we'll go down. I have it on a completely different layer. I'll set up PET and I'm going to eliminate that. And let's go into, I'm going to go to wireframe so we can see what I'm talking about. And let's just remove the environment and our little tabletop. Okay, I left this tabletop on all of these. So I was going to get rid of that. So for PET, what we need to do is we need to build what we're going to render. It's not just like drawing pictures, we're actually building geometry. And in effect, we're taking a photograph of it. So it's like building a model and bringing it into the photo studio, but we're doing all of that within the 3D program. So I have the same piece of geometry. This time I took the geometry, I put a finish on it. It's not absolutely necessary at this point, but I wanted to have a surface up here that I can eliminate when I turn into a wall. I'm going to show you how to do a shell on an object like this. So I have that connected right here, and you can see the cross lines, the ISO lines at the top. Let us know. So that's a complete solid. So what I'm going to do is take this and make a wall thickness of this. And then we're also going to make another 3D solid on the inside that we're going to use for the liquid that goes inside. So we're going to have a clear bottle on the outside, and then we're going to have another part on the inside, which will be opaque. And we'll see what that effect looks like. So the bottle's in here. I created this cylindrical shape, which is sitting over here, and I'll show you what that's going to do. So we're going to shell this bottle. So if we go under our solid tools, we have this little icon here. It looks like a little hexagon shape here, but it's called shell closed poly surface. So you need to have a solid first. So I'm going to click on that. The first option we need to do is create a wall thickness. So this particular one, I'm going to bring down to 60 thousandths, 0.06, which is about a 16th of an inch. That's relatively thin, but it could be a little bit thick for a PET bottle. PET bottles are pretty thin. That's like a water plastic bottle. You know, it's kind of a squeezy, but it's crystal clear like glass. So this really depends on your effect. If you really want to see a gutsy wall, then you can go a little bit thicker. If you want to be a little bit more realistic, you go into towards the thin side. But I'll do 60, which is sort of a nice compromise. So I've selected that wall thickness there. And what we do when we're shelling, they want us to pick one surface that's going to disappear. The one for us, for bottle, the obvious one is to select this. What happened? Shell. Okay, I didn't do enter, so I'm going to go back and do 60.06, enter. Okay, now it wants us to select this top surface. I'm going to select that top surface. And what's that saying is it's going to shell, it's going to make a wall thickness on this entire part and eliminate that piece at the top. So by selecting that and then just going to enter, take a moment. I have now created a wall thickness. It goes in. So I have this entire thing is now has a thickness, a wall thickness all around it, and the top is open. And I had it on save because I was keeping my actual bottle here, which I'm not going to need for this one, but I'll undo this as we go along. So now I have that bottle as a wall shape. So what I want to do is I need to create another solid inside of this bottle for the liquid that's going to be inside. But that liquid cannot touch the inside of the bottle. If it does, it won't render correctly. It gets in the way. When you touch something that's clear, and this almost happens in reality, it actually creates pigment on the clear part. We want to keep that clear part crystal clear, but we want to see through it to another solid on the inside. So we can control the reflectivity and the translucence of these different objects that are inside of one another. So I hope that's clear. I'm going to try to demonstrate that. So what I'm going to do is take my my walled bottle that I have right now, and I'm going to difference it from this cylinder so I can end up with an inside piece. And then I'm going to scale that. So we're going to go under our solid tools. I'm going to go to a Boolean difference. So with the Boolean, we have to select the object we're going to subtract from. So that's going to be this piece here, and I'm going to enter. And then I want to select my bottle on the inside, which is that right there. It's a double wall. And I'm going to do enter. So what it has done now, it has created a part that's on the inside, and it's right down here. No, not that one. Okay, I'm going to take the outside cylinder, which I don't need anymore, and I'm going to select select that, delete, and I'm going to delete that. Just trying to get rid of the parts that we don't need. And I have my bottle. It's not the walled bottle. Then I'm going to delete that. And now I have a double wall bottle. And here's my part. I have it down here, so it's got a little bit of a fill line. So this part inside the center here, let's go to front, represents a solid that is the inside of the bottle. It's completely lined up with that wall. And I have it slightly low here, so we might be able to see a little bit of that as a fill line. I think I have that in the rendering. What we need to do now is we need to move that away from this edge slightly. So I'm just going to do that by scaling. So I'm going to come up here to our 100% scale tool, and I'm going to start down here, and I'm going to move it around a little bit. So I'm going to scale it just a little bit. I'm watching that edge. I'm just going to bring it in from the wall ever so slightly. Doesn't have to be very big. Did I do that as a copy? Let's so not copy. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to delete the original. I didn't want to copy, so let's delete that. Okay, here it is. So I can look in here closely. See, that little bit of a distance from that wall is huge. I have it quite a bit from the top, but that's okay because that'll be our fill line. And I have it slightly up on the bottom here, which will be okay. I can move this around depending on where I want that to sit, but it's critical that that solid object is inside of the PET bottle and not touching it at all. Okay, so that's setting up the geometry for doing a PET bottle. So let's go back to here, and that's what I have here. I have our two objects. I have the bottle, and then I have it's called the juice or the liquid on the inside. And I have my closure back into position, and I have the label set up. I'm using the exact same label. Here's the situation where this label is going to show up now. If I did a decal onto a clear bottle, we won't see it. It disappears. It doesn't hold up on a clear bottle. I spoke with tech support, and they're sort of trying to figure that out and work that out. So right now, since I have my point of view set up, all I have to do is come down to set view, perspective one, and voila, there we have it. So I have the environment off, and I have my little table off, and we're in the PET bottle. So I'm going to go back up to my ray traced, and let's take a look at this without doing anything with the environment. Okay, so now we start to see a wall thickness along this edge. We get to see some refraction on these internal edges that are seeing. So it starts to look like there's a plastic bottle with something on the inside. Now, the part I have on the inside, I have it opaque. I'm using the exact same material that I had on the first rendering, but I'm just putting it inside. So it has a slight plastic finish to it. So it's a little bit of shining going on. There's a couple of reflections happening here, but it's sort of dead. And I do have the floor, so we get a little bit of a shadow down here. So it's okay. But I think if we start to add our environment, our little tabletop surface, it'll become that much more interesting. So let's do that right now. We'll add the environment. Just takes a moment because it's the ray tracing is starting to pick up. Only 10 cycles though, so it's relatively quick compared to rendering it every time. So since I have a very shiny finish on this outside, I have it on a glass finish, and I think I have it 100% shiny. So now it's really like a mirror. It's reflecting this really dark piece I have in the environment. And it's bringing up this light in the front. And then back here, I have this glow to this one side over here on the right. That's the backlighting. So it's really making this go around and it's picking up some of those reflections on all these other surfaces. And this little white thing sitting here, that's coming from my environment, the studio environment that I have set up in the rendering area. So this is looking pretty good. I love the metal up here. I have that a little bit of a satin finish and it's reflecting in there quite nicely. So this is the exact same geometry and we're just playing with different materials. Closure, I'm leaving exactly the same. So if I go back to our rendering tools here, I'm going to turn off the ground plane. So that little shadow at the bottom went away. And I'm going to go back to our layers and I can bring in this little tabletop or this flat surface that I have on here that's in glass that we will see. So you get this little arced area. I mean, if we don't like that, we can do different ways of putting the surfaces under there. I kind of liked it, and I'm going to use it in the last rendering with the glass. So you can see how these reflections are not going all the way to the bottom anymore because they're being obstructed by this flat surface. Now, I think it looks kind of interesting, but we can play with that. So we can move things around, reduce the size of this, and get those reflections and highlights to move around. So this looks pretty good for a PET bottle with a, could be a juice or a lotion or something that's opaque on the inside. We could also make that inside piece clear, which is what I'm going to do in the glass rendering. So PET and glass are very similar. As far as the surfaces, the material in here, I'm using glass for both of them. So this is a glass material that I'm just suggesting will be PET because PET is it's a crystal clear, just like glass. So this starts to work right here for this environment. So I'm going to go for the next one. I'm going to go back into rendered. So I don't have to worry about the ray tracing. And then the last one we have here is glass. So let's take away the tabletop and I'm going to take away my environment and take away the PET bottle. So we're now into glass. So this is what it looks like in render mode. So it doesn't look like much, but you can see we have this nice thick bottom. So let's go into shaded. And that's right, I have the tabletop on all of these. So let me delete that because I have that on another layer. So this is going to be very similar to the PET bottle. I'm just going to do it slightly differently. So here I have the exact same geometry. See, I'm not going to connect the top because I really don't. I do have it connected here. It doesn't really matter. Either one is fine. I do have the little push up in the bottom. And in this particular rendering, this will become more apparent because in the other two, we didn't really see that because I have an opaque internal part. So this is the exact same geometry and I have the radiused edge. So what I'm going to do is let's go to the front. Where are my views? And let's go to wireframe so I can see what's inside. Wireframe. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to do the wall thickness here. I'm going to build the wall thickness because I need that thick area on the bottom. So I'm literally just going to scale this 100%. This is going to give us an uneven wall thickness, which actually isn't bad because glass quite often is like that. Glass is not very perfect. The wall thicknesses are very irregular. And I've done some other tutorials where I really emphasize how that's going to work. So let's just snap. I'm going to turn my near off. Let's just snap right here to center. I am going to scale this in and I'm going to guess at a wall thickness. I'm looking at that. I'm going to go a little bit thicker than the 60 thousandths approximately and scale that in. So I'm sort of looking at this distance here. So I scaled in a copy. So now I'm going to look at this and you can see it's really tight at the top and then quite big at the bottom. I'm just going to move it down a little and sort of center it. So it'll be a little irregular, but that's not bad. So right up here, this is a little bit tight because I just scaled it, but this wall is looking quite nice. So I'm going to leave it like that. So that's not bad. So to create that thick bottom, I'm going to literally take this inside piece and I'm going to trim it with this line. So if I go to my trim tool, I'm going to select my cutting object, enter. I'm going to select the inside part of the object down here. I want it to go away. So you can see how I cut off the bottom of that inside piece of geometry. So let's look at that in perspective. So here it is floating in the middle of this. Now I have this nice sharp edge. So what we're going to do is we're going to imitate that inside thick wall by filleting that edge down at the bottom. So we come up to our fillet tool, our fillet command, and we're going to do fillet edge. And we are going to, oh no, I can't do this yet. Sorry. We have to cap the bottom. The bottom is now open because I trimmed this. So we're going to go to our solid tools and I'm going to cap planar holes. So all I have to do is select this object and enter. And you can see these two lines here that were created. Those are the ISO lines. That tells us in line drawing, in wireframe, that we have now capped that bottom. So that's ready to go. So now we can fill it. So I'm going to fillet edge, and I'm going to, I have several edges here, so I'm just going to select them. I don't need to use shift at all. It's just selecting all of them. So I'm going to do enter. And now I can select this handle, and I'm going to, I think I'm going to do this at roughly 3/8, 0.38, enter, enter. So now that inside object has this nice radius. I'm sort of imitating how a blow molded glass would function. I think I mentioned this on another tutorial. As a designer, we really can't control too much of the inside contours. We can control the outside of the bottle. That's our tool. That we can design. Quite often with blow molding, the wall is just imitating what the outside of the object looks like. In glass, if we control the amount of glass and the temperature and how quickly we add the air and the pressure of the air, we can create these thick bottoms. This is huge in glass, especially high-end glass with fragrance and spirits and all that. This whole thick bottom is quite beautiful. For high production glass, you'll notice that the bottoms aren't as thick. It's a lot quicker because they're blowing less glass, they're doing it very quickly, and they're cooling it. And quite often it'll be like a Boston Round or a very simple bottle where the glass does not accumulate in the corners. So that's high production glass. I'm imitating a more of a high-end type of glass with this thick bottom. So by doing this, I can now difference this inside piece of geometry from this outside piece, and that'll give us our glass bottle. But remember, we're going to put a clear liquid on the inside. So I need another three-dimensional piece of geometry on the inside, which is going to represent that juice. So again, we need to make this, we're going to scale this again ever so slightly, just away from the wall. And I'm going to scale a copy, have copy on. So let's just, let's snap to something here. Right there. So I am going to scale a copy of that just a little bit. So now I have this other solid in here that's just slightly in, just enough so I can use that. I didn't trim the top to make a fill level. Like I'd probably trim it down here so we can get like this beautiful fill level. That does help a lot. I'm going to let that go for now, but that in glass bottles, that usually looks quite nice. I've done that in some of the other tutorials for glass. So now I have that solid inside that we can control its color and translucency. So now we're going to go back to our difference tool. I'm going to select this outside part of the bottle, enter. I'm going to select this inside piece of geometry, which is going to be the inside of the bottle, and then I'm going to enter. So now I have separated, differenced. Oops, it didn't quite go. Huh, what happened? Difference. All right, so I'm going to select this, um, enter. That should do it. Oh, all right. Something's malfunctioning here. Let's just take a look. All right. It should work. I probably moved something incorrectly. I don't know what's going on, but normally that would work. So if we difference that, uh, huh, let's see. Okay. All right. So make believe that worked. It does work because I have it over here. So once we do that and we separate that part, so now we have our two parts again. We have our outer glass piece with an outer wall and an inner wall, and then we have this other piece of geometry on the inside, which is going to represent the juice that's inside the bottle. So now this is all set up. We can go back to our point of view, set views, perspective one, and then we are going to uh, add the materials. So for the inside, the juice part, that's the main difference. The outside is just like the PET. I have it in clear glass. I didn't do anything unusual with that. So we go to render tools and we go to our materials and I have this set up here. So this is going to represent the liquid on the inside. So I'm using the same color, but I'm doing the inside liquid in glass. So it's glass, but it's going to look like a very clear, translucent material on the inside. Clarity, I backed off a little bit, so it's not crystal clear. IOR is just a refraction. It depends, it shows how light refracts to it. Quite often you'll end up in the lower numbers, 1.25 to 150 or so around there. You have to play with that so you can see how that's going to affect that. So I left that pretty much where it is. So that's what the juice is, the liquid on the inside. The outside is glass and the closure is exactly the same. The main difference here between the PET bottle and the glass bottle is that thick bottom, and I made a thicker wall. So that's the material. Everything else is the same, the environment and the lighting. So I'm going to come down in here and we're going to take a look at ray traced, which will start to imitate what this is going to look like. All right, so we have some of these kind of dark areas up in here, which is coming from our environment and reflecting in there. And then we have the thick bottom, which is starting to look quite nice. We have that nice little radius, and we're seeing a little bit of that punt and push up at the bottom. And you can see the walls a bit thicker, so it's starting to show up on these internal contours a little bit better. And the closure is the same. But this is without adding any of that environmental part. So I'm going to add the environment now, which was the that big black panel and those two additional lights that I had set up. So these additional lights you can see gives us these beautiful highlights and I have a nice backlighting going on here. So even these dark areas that it's coming from our studio environment looks interesting. It's starting to do something to it to make it a little bit more depth to it. And the clearness of the juice itself, we can start to see the inside of the bottom of the bottle. So these are nuances. And I played with this a little bit. You have to go back and forth. You can play with the translucence of the materials and you can move your lighting around. You can make the lighting brighter. There's a whole series of different things you can do. By building the geometry, it allows you to fool with those different things. Like if I had three or four of these bottles and I changed and moved them and copied them, and I just changed the color of the juice on the inside, you could have a whole line of bottles that look quite beautiful in this exact same environment. So another thing we can do is bring in the this little table top that I have here. So this is nice. It's a clean environment. It's about the showing the bottle. It looks like glass. It looks like we have a translucent material. The one thing I would add is that fill line. I don't have the fill line. I have it up under the cap. There's nothing wrong with that, but it would look a little bit more interesting if I had trimmed off the top of that inside piece of geometry that we would still see a fill line, which is kind of a nice effect. So another thing I want to show here is what to do with these environments. So if I go back to the our rendering dialog box here, where I have the environment and I have the studio. The studio is just my standard lighting that's going on here. But if we go to our 360 environment, we can Right now, I have it on Rhino Studio, which is pretty generic. It's just this white background. It just has some lighting on it. I'm going to bring in a more complex environment so we can see the difference. Right now, I'm only reflecting that little environment that I built, so it's very controlled. I think it looks nice and it shows the object without distracting from it. But if you want more theatrics to it, we can pick up some of these other environments. See, I have a RDJ window, right? So I'm going to just click this and show you what happens. So there's this environment behind here. It's actually an entire room with furniture and it's got a window and foliage. So I have it up against this window in this environment with all this foliage. Look at the bottle. All this whole entire environment is reflecting into this bottle, plus the environment that I built. So it's quite amazing. So this is a completely different feeling by adding this environment. We still have that nice highlight here in the front, which really makes this quite beautiful. But look at all the detail in the reflection. It's like, it's wow. And that's just from putting an environment around it, which I have in this 360 window, and I have selected use the custom environment for reflections. So we're seeing the environment and the reflections are coming in here. If I had taken this RDJ window and put it down here, where I have a custom environment for reflection, we would have the bottle with all these amazing reflections and no background. The background would be white. So you have to kind of play with these different nuances. My opinion is if I had a bottle with all this beautiful reflections going on and nothing going on in the background, it would look a little odd. So you have to kind of play. I liked the original as far as design. It shows the aesthetics and the contour of design. This gives us much more theater. So depending on what kind of shot that you want to do, this could be very interesting. Okay, so that's dealing with some of these effects, working with backgrounds and creating environments and lighting and materiality.